Hey everyone, welcome to another top 10 video. Today's top 10 is the best permission spells in Modern, or at least the permission spells I would pick out of the current meta and maybe some historically. So let's get started. Before we do though, as usual, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down below. And that like button really goes a long way and helps others find my channel. Really appreciate your support. Alright, so before we get to the top 10 as usual, or at least most of the time, honorable mentions. These are cards that just didn't fit into the top 10. I feel like they probably would fit in some of your lists, but not mine. But they should definitely be mentioned either way. Flusterstorm definitely has its place. It shows up as one of or two of in a lot of sideboards in Modern right now, but generally speaking, I tend to favor other permission spells over it. Dovin's Veto as well. It's a card you do actually see sometimes in the white-blue control decks, but not all the time. I do like it though. It's a negate with an uncounterable effect on it, so it's nice. Remand comes in and out of favor. Most decks that play it now are usually doing something other than control, so they're they're either playing some weird tempo deck or they're playing some weird combo deck, or sometimes Tron even plays it. Pact of Negation used to see a lot more play when combo was a bit more prevalent, and especially Ad Nauseam. It's kind of like that last minute pact to defend that, protect Ad Nauseam, but now you don't really see it in a lot of decks anymore. Ceremonious Rejection was just something was a card I actually enjoyed a lot in sideboards. Every once in a while I might play it depending on the 60 I'm playing, but yeah, sees play here and there. If Tron or Artifact decks become prevalent, it's basically a one mana counter spell, which is always nice. But those are the honorable mentions. Let's get to the top 10. At number 10, Condescend. I really like Condescend. It's quite elegant. It's usually sees play in Tron decks because they can generate so much mana. Well, blue Tron decks, I should say, because it could generate so much mana. And it even has a Scry 2 ability, because why not? But you could essentially tap, as much mana as you need to make sure your opponent can't pay for that spell, and boom, it gets countered, which is always nice. It reminds me of Logic Knot, which sees definitely less play now because of Counterspell, which we may or may not get to later on in this list. But of course, Logic Knot allows you to delve, as opposed to just paying money. Mana money. It's kind of the same thing considering how expensive lands are. But it's the same effect, but you don't scry. Slightly different effects, same outcome. Number 9, Spell Snare. Now, I never liked Spell Snare, and it has nothing to do with its power level, because clearly, especially in the past, but even now, Spell Snare has its place in Modern. It's a 1 mana counter spell for a 2-drop essentially, or a 2 CMC spell, which are, Modern is always littered with it, but it has seen its fall in total stock, let's say, or total market share in Modern in recent times. Just fallen out of favor. I never liked it. If I ever played it in a deck, it was reluctant because people just only play it. But generally speaking, I find ways to get rid of it. I never liked the condition that it had. I'd rather something else. But I still think it deserves to be in the top 10 spot because it shuts down a lot of things, and it shut them down way before Counterspell was legal in Modern. So you got to give kudos to Spell Snare. Spell Pierce is a card that I enjoy playing with a lot. Again, don't play too much now, but a lot of the Murktide decks play a 1 of, sometimes a 2 of, which is always nice. Your opponents rarely see it coming. I mean, most Modern players know Spell Pierce exists, and only a few of them kind of like sniff out that a Spell Pierce is coming. And sometimes it just shuts you out, especially in the early game. You most likely don't have the mana to pay for it, even if you're casting like a 1 CMC spell. And Spell Pierce just comes out of nowhere and shuts down removal, shuts down opposing permission, shuts down anything you want. Definitely deserves a top 8 spot. And of course, other cards like it. Mana Leak, which has definitely fallen out of favor because of an aforementioned card. And the card I hate the most, Mana Tithe, because that's a card I never see coming in a white deck, although I guess I should see it. It's just, it hits you and it always gets you, and it's super annoying. Number 7, Drawn on the Lock. I like Drawn on the Lock sometimes. In my experience, I always get caught with it not being able to counter the spell I want to counter because there's not enough cards in my opponent's graveyard. But in the right deck, Drawn on the Lock is pretty brutal. I mean, it could counter a spell, or it could destroy a creature, And that's just nice. You have flexibility in a permission spell if you're playing blue, black, and X. So Drown to Lock is, I think it's a great permission spell to have in Modern. You just make sure you're filling up your opponent's graveyard, because if you're not, it's gonna really, really suck. Number 6, Mystical Dispute. So obviously sees almost exclusive sideboard play, and it does come in mostly against control matchups, or tempo matchups, or a combo deck that heavily relies on blue spells. But I really like it. It's elegant. If you're targeting a blue spell, it's essentially a 1 CMC mana leak, which is pretty damn brutal. You could be, that's using your mana extremely efficiently, which I always like as a tempo player. I don't always include in my sideboards, but it's definitely something I've been warming up to over time, and I don't think we can really dispute its prevalence in Modern, at least in sideboard play. For the right matchups, I think Mystical Dispute is really flexible. Worst case, you pay full 3 mana for it. I mean, that's really the worst case, but most of the time, it's 1. Number 5, yeah, Cryptic Command. You probably thought it was going to be lower on the list. Maybe if we rewind it 5 years, Cryptic Command would probably be number 2 or 1 or 3 or something like that. I think recently, as the format has sped up, Cryptic Command tends to be slightly slower. If you're playing it in an all-out control shell, then that's a different story. But even nowadays, you see it as a 2 of, sometimes even a 1 of. In the past, it was a 3-4 of. So yeah, it's definitely waned as well in terms of popularity. But it definitely deserves a spot in the top 5. Top 10. In this case, the top 5. Just because it's so powerful. It's such a powerful permission spell. You counter a spell, and you can do 1 of 3 other things at any given time. And sometimes you just don't counter. Who cares? You just tap all their opponent's creatures, and you draw a card. Whatever it is, Cryptic Command can probably do it, and it's my number 5. Number 4, Stubborn Denial. Now, Temur Delver players have been playing Stubborn Denial way before it was popular. I was playing Stubborn Denial essentially when it was spoiled. In the good old days. It's been too long. But Stubborn Denial is probably, it's not number 1 on my list, but it's probably number 1 in my personal list of top 10 permission spells, because it's just such an awesome card. In the right deck, it's a 1 mana counter for all non-creature spells. You name it. Removal, planeswalkers. If it's not a creature, it's going to get hit by Stubborn Denial. And it's really easy to turn on the Ferocious Trigger. Again, if you're playing Tarmogoyf, Hooting Mandrills, whatever it may be, if you're a Temur Delver player, you know what I'm talking about. I love Stubborn Denial. Now the Grixis decks played when they're playing Death's Shadow and other types of big creatures, which is fine, and they should be, because Stubborn Denial is awesome. I am currently the only owner of a Stubborn Denial art print. It's hanging up in my wall right now. I can see it. I am the only one in the world. Confirmed. I spoke to the artist when I asked for it, when I paid for it, of course, and they said, yes, we confirm you are the first Stubborn Denial print owner. So there you go. That alone deserves a top 5 spot for Stubborn Denial. Number 3, Archmage's Charm. This is a more recent printing, Modern Horizons, and it's basically Cryptic Command Light. It's 1 CMC cheaper, and it does slightly different things and less things, and you only get to choose 1. So it's definitely Cryptic Command Light, but it sees a decent amount of play. Actually, I would argue maybe even a bit more than Cryptic Command. Sometimes it's just a 3 mana counter spell. Sometimes it's just a 3 mana draw 2 cards end of your opponent's turn, which is perfectly legitimate when you need to refill your hand. And sometimes, when it's hilarious, you take control of your opponent's Death Shadow. I don't know, DRC, my Delver's secrets have been taken away from me. Whatever it is, you can steal it, and there are plenty of 1 CMC, scary creatures in Modern. And Archmage's Charm allows you to do it main board, because it's definitely a main board playable card. I really like it. I've definitely warmed up to it, and I really love that art in foil, and that's my number 3. Number 2, Counterspell. I think it's a testament to how powerful Modern has become. That Counterspell was, removed from the ban list, and yeah, okay, replaced a bunch of cards, made a bunch of permission, redundant, and you can see it all on the screen now. I think a lot of these cards, well, Deprive was never really that popular, although I personally love Deprive, but some decks still played it because it was the closest you get to Counterspell. But now it's dead forever. But even Negate, Mana Leak, Remand to an extent, Disdainful Stroke, these cards really don't make sense anymore. There are a few decks that still might play it when they're just splashing blue. But if you can secure 2 blue early in the deck, then you should be playing Counterspell over any of these cards that you're seeing here most of the time. I love Counterspell. I'm happy I have it. I play 2 to 4 of in most decks that, you know, are playing blue. And it's just elegant. It's the best rate you are ever going to get on a counter, an all-out Counterspell. 2 blue counter target spell. Elegant, it's legal, I love it, it'll never be banned again, and it didn't break anything in Modern. A lot of people thought it would, it did not. Last but not least, number 1, what is the best permission spell in Modern? Of course, Force of Will. You know, most other formats don't have access to Force of Will. We do. It's a great card. I'm just super happy that we have access to such a power... Oh, wait. I didn't mean Force of Will, I meant Force of Negation. Of course we don't have Force of Will in Modern, but maybe one day we will, because Modern is the new Legacy, and Legacy is dead. You could downvote now, twice. Force of Negation is my number 1, though. Although it has fallen out of favor recently, just because the meta has shifted to be slightly more creature heavy, or not necessarily worrying about non-creature spells on your opponent's turn. But I personally love it. It's a card that allows me to tap out and feel comfortable when I pass the turn to my opponent, because I know, worst case, if some crazy non-creature spell comes down, I can counter it. And Force of Negation allows me to do that. It may not be in the top 1 spot for your list, but it's definitely in the top 1 spot of mine. Super, super happy it exists. I know there are plenty of people that think it shouldn't, but I think it's perfectly fine for Modern. I think it's proof that Modern can take these type of spells. And look, the format is perfectly diverse. Very few people are actually complaining about it. And Force of Negation is perfectly well balanced enough to make for a healthy format. So, there we go. That is my number 1. I'm super happy. Before I go, though, I think it should be mentioned, Disrupting Shoal used to be played before Force of Negation was legal. Not in as many decks, that's for sure. Disrupting Shoal definitely has a bit more of a build around, because its restriction is way more specific. But for Temur Delver players, you have been playing Disrupting Shoal for years before Force of Negation existed. And yeah, I mean, sad to say, I really do like Disrupting Shoal. Some lists do exist out there that play both, and those are kind of crazy pitch lists, but they're fun to play either way. And of course, the other card that's comparable here is Pact of Negation, which again, like I said in the Mount of Mentions, doesn't see play anymore anyway, but it is in theory a free counter spell, kind of temporary. But Force of Negation is number 1. So that's my top 10 permission spells in Modern list. Let me know what would be in your top 10. Let me know what you thought about my picks in the comment section down below. Feel free to scold me or praise me. I don't really care, as long as it's constructive. But yeah, I would really love to hear from you what you would have chosen. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you enjoy my content in general, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really goes a long way. It helps me out a lot. If you want to become a member here on YouTube, hit that join button, which should be in and around that subscribe button. Check out the different membership tiers and the different perks you get at each tier. You know, I'd love to have you as part of my YouTube community officially as a member. And I think the membership tiers are pretty interesting, have some cool little features in there. So check it out. I would really appreciate your support. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, share my content on social media, watch my content start to finish like you're doing right now. It really does go a long way, so thank you for that. Lastly, if you want to become a patron, check out the Patreon link in the description of this video. Check out the Patreon Rewards program. In a nutshell, you give me money every month. I use that money to buy sealed product, which I open up on this channel, and then I give you back that money in the form of rares and mythics at the end of every year. The longer you're a patron, the more rares and mythics you get. Basically, 1 rare mythic for every month that you're a patron. And the value of those rares are anything really between $3 and $15. Some of them go even higher, as you know. So even if you average out about $5 per rare, that's $5 a month, you get your money back, but odds are you'll make more. Anyway, all that information is on Patreon. There's a video on there that explains it all. We really appreciate your support either way. Thanks, and have a good one.